So it wasn't a fluke. The Lions are still good. But are they still a serious contender or even the team to beat in the NFC North? Well, they are 3-1 coming off of a big primetime win heading into their bye, so that certainly helps. This Lions team looks similar, but they also feel a little bit different. That original magic from last season is gone, and now the Lions have to prove again that they actually belong. And they're off to a pretty good start. There is no better way to show that you're still a true contender than on Monday Night Football against an undefeated team. The Lions ended up playing well in primetime and beat the Seahawks, winning 42-29. But they really controlled the entire game. They led 21-7 at halftime, and the Seahawks did keep pushing back, but every time they did, the Lions had an answer. When we look back on that game, Jared Goff is going to be the main thing remembered. He ended up going 18 of 18 and literally did not have an incompletion. It's the most passes ever thrown in a game without an incompletion. Now, it's not technically an NFL record because it wasn't 20 attempts, but it's still damn impressive nonetheless. Goff ended the night with 292 yards and threw 2 touchdowns that went to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, and oh yeah, Goff also caught a touchdown too. Yes, Goff caught a touchdown pass from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Honestly, it was quite the night for Goff, who hilariously enough didn't even get the game ball. When Dan Campbell realized that Goff was perfect on the night, he said that he felt awful because he ended up giving the game ball to somebody else. It really was a great performance, not just for Goff, but the entire team. And now the Lions head into their ridiculously early Week 5 bye with a 3-1 record. Being 3-1 feels extremely different from being just 500. Their lone loss on the year was in Week 2 to the Buccaneers, who, to be fair, have been pretty good with Baker Mayfield just dealing this year, and that was a close game, but the Lions did end up losing 20-16. As for Detroit's wins this season, the Lions ended up beating the Rams again in Week 1, 26-20 in overtime, in what was a rematch from the wild card last season. And it's always cool to see Jared Goff play Matthew Stafford just because of that whole trade. Then the other Lions win on the year was a 20-13 victory over the Cardinals, who are now 1-3 and did just get clapped by the Commanders. I do think that the Lions are in a good spot heading into their bye, but the Vikings are on a roll. If Sam Darnold keeps this up, one of those two teams are going to need a wildcard spot to make the postseason. Now, from a statistical standpoint, it definitely looks like Jared Goff has taken a bit of a step back, but when you watch him play, I honestly think it's looked about the same level of play, but the numbers just don't support that. He's thrown 5 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, yet he's completing 71% of his passes and has thrown for over 1,000 yards and is still winning games. I'd say the big surprise this season is that Amon-Ra St. Brown hasn't even been his top receiver by yardage. It's actually been Jameson Williams, who has almost 300 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 13 receptions. He's a guy that I think everyone is rooting for to be good. He was such a good player at Alabama before tearing his ACL in the national championship, a game that he was dominating in, by the way. It definitely hurt his draft stock a bit, and he dropped to the 12th overall pick when the Lions eventually took him. He ended up missing a lot of his rookie year and then was suspended for gambling early last season, and now hopefully this is the year where we get a full season from him, and he looks amazing. He's a serious deep ball threat at any time, and he showed that against the Seahawks. Now, Amon-Ra is still playing well. He leads the team with 27 receptions and has 252 yards and 2 touchdowns, so nothing worth panicking over. Then Sam Laporta has definitely followed the trend of every other tight end and just not been letting it up on the scoreboard. So I hope you didn't take a tight end early in your fantasy draft, because it definitely seems to be a bad year for that apparently. Still though, Laporta has 12 catches for 147 yards. But more than anything, the Lions have really made it clear that they rely heavily on their run game, which, makes sense when you have a really good two-headed backfield and a dominant offensive line. The Lions might have the best offensive line in the NFL, with a lot of recognizable names. Left tackle, Taylor Decker; left guard, Graham Glasgow; center, Frank Ragnow; right guard, Kevin Zeitler; and right tackle, Penei Sewell. Ragnow is hurt right now, but the line is still playing at a high level. Then the split between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the backfield still makes literally no sense. I mean, Gibbs has 54 carries for 285 yards and 3 touchdowns, while Montgomery has 63 carries for 271 yards and 1 touchdown. There really doesn't seem to actually be a consistent split. It really feels like it doesn't depend on the drive or if it's goal line work. They're just gonna throw whoever's ready out there. Honestly, I think Dan Campbell's just out there coaching on vibes for real. It kind of just depends on who he feels like throwing out there, I guess. It's the exact same thing when it comes to play calling decisions too. He just wings it and decides when to go for it or to make a big risk or just to have Amon-Ra throw a touchdown pass to Jared Goff. I mean, honestly, it's pretty awesome, I'm not gonna lie, and it's a big reason why the Lions are so likable. It's really been such a long time coming for Lions fans. It has literally been decades of disappointment and agony, but Dan Campbell has really rewritten the script. Campbell was hired back in 2021 and took over a pretty bad team that went 3-13-1. A rough year, but it landed them Aiden Hutchinson, a great pass rusher who already has 6.5 sacks this season. That same 2021 season was when the Rams went on to win the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford right after he was traded from the Lions. But of course, in that same trade, the Lions got back Jared Goff and some picks. That trade alone has really rebuilt and set up the Lions for what they are now. The first round picks that they got were used on Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs. Then they got 2 second-round picks, defensive linemen Josh Paschal and Sam Laporta, and 2 third-round picks, cornerback Ifeatu Melifonwu and defensive tackle Broderick Martin. What that trade has done for the future of the Lions is beyond incredible, and it was truly a win-win trade. The Rams literally won a Super Bowl because of that trade. Meanwhile, the Lions, well, they got out of years of disappointment. And the very next year after Stafford got a ring, the Lions improved to 9-8 on the year. And that was impressive, but it was nothing compared to last year. The Lions went 12-5 and won their division for the first time since 1993. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers had literally won the Lions division more recently than them before last season, but their season didn't end at just division champs. They ended up even winning a playoff game for the first time since 1991, ironically beating the Rams in the wild card round. And the Lions weren't even done there. They went on to beat the Buccaneers the next week to make the NFC Championship, but did lose to the 49ers by 3 points. That's how close the Lions got to playing in a Super Bowl. Detroit is no longer a team that's been bad for forever who people hope can turn it around. They have real expectations now. You just can't help but feel excited for Lions fans. It's really a lot like when Baker Mayfield was on the Browns and they were finally decent after years of being bad. Of course, they then went on to ruin it by trading Baker for Deshaun Masseuse Watson, but the vibes before that were great. The Lions were bad for just such a long time, and people now want to see them succeed, which, makes sense. It also really helps that Jared Goff has an awesome redemption story of really not being wanted, and now he's a pretty good NFL quarterback and an easy guy to root for. Then, of course, there's Dan Campbell, who's just a fiery, likable guy who makes you want to root for them, and not to mention all the fun weapons that the Lions have, like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs. There are a lot of people rooting for the Lions now, but it doesn't look like it's going to be a cakewalk to win the NFC North again. The Minnesota Vikings are playing really well to start this season. They're currently undefeated, and Sam Darnold is quite literally playing like the best quarterback in the NFC. Now, a little side note here, what if I told you a month ago that the 2 best quarterbacks in the NFC through 4 weeks would be Sam Darnold and Jaden Daniels? And of course, they'd be a combined 7-1. Yeah, I wouldn't have believed me either, but I'm certainly not complaining. Good for those guys. The tides are shifting, and Kevin O'Connell is doing one hell of a job with the Vikings. Minnesota can absolutely win the division, or at the very least, make the postseason at this rate. Then you have the Packers, who are in a pretty weird spot with Jordan Love being banged up and not really looking 100%, but they could definitely still bounce back, so don't count them out. And then you have the Chicago Bears, who I'll give a little bit of slack to. They're still figuring things out with their rookie quarterback Caleb Williams, but they might even be better than last season. So another division title isn't going to be a cakewalk for the Lions, but with Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, and a super talented team, they can definitely do it again.